now. I'd like to start first with a welcome and also a note that these sessions are being recorded. And also just to say that I'm going to welcome you, and then our junior school headmaster will then present to us our topic for today as part of our Transformation Thursdays. As we move along our journey towards the greater and bigger and better college that we all want. And our theme today is strengthening the foundation. So if you allow me, please, if we can start with a prayer, and then I will hand over to our headmaster. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we thank you that all good things and gifts come from you. We thank you that we can trust you for the future of our families. Please guide our children in every step they take. We pray they would know your provision and protection. Make steady their steps, we pray. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you. With that said, I'd like to welcome our headmaster, who is going to guide us today. Please, Mr. Berndsen, it's all yours, sir. You may proceed.
Thanks very much, Lucius, and thanks very much to everyone who's joined us this evening, especially to the teachers. It's so great to see so many of you here, especially after a day in the classroom. And so much of what I'm going to talk about will actually rely very heavily on the teachers to implement. So I'm very grateful that you are with us. And if I could just have a moment to share my screen with you, and then I will begin. So at this point, I'm just going to ask Mr. Vanal if there are any technical issues that I run into that I can't see. Please feel free to interrupt and unmute yourself to let me know. But as Lucius mentioned, this is such a wonderful topic to speak about. First of all, the main theme, strengthening the foundation. But then the little subheading that follows underneath that really encapsulates what we're trying to achieve. The diversity and inclusion exist in the little things, the small day-to-day activities and mindset that make up a community and create a positive culture. And I'd like to start by sharing a line from a very famous song written by a very famous singer. But who the singer is and what the song is actually not important. But I would like you to just take a close look at the lyrics that he came up with of one line. It's a sad man, my friend, who is living in his own skin and can't stand the company. So at any school, all academic results, sporting achievements, cultural accomplishments, and any other school accolades become irrelevant if any of our children are feeling this way. So to help children with this, we really need to pay attention to that part in red. And we really need to see that diversity and inclusion must exist in the little things that we do, and the attention to detail, the mindsets that we have a power to influence, and this community that we can use to assist us in creating a positive school culture. And this afternoon, I will speak in the context of our school, but sometimes I'll also speak about schools in general. And I'd also like to include what our school has done to address inclusivity and diversity to date, what it is currently doing, and what it has planned to do. I'll also share some of the tangible and more concrete examples, and I'd also share the principles behind the thinking of the things that we would like to implement. It is important to understand that the college has really begun this journey, and there is still a lot of work to do. But I also think that we mustn't ignore what has been done. And as a junior school, we know the responsibility that we have because we do represent the foundation of this process. Hence the topic, strengthening the foundation. And I'll be covering 6 main points. The first is the foundation that is a junior school. So this will involve the systems and the processes that will set our children up for diversity and inclusive success. The second theme will be through the eyes of the children. And this is the mindsets that we have the power to influence. But we also need to understand, how do children interpret diversity and inclusion and other more sensitive terms like racism? The third theme will be teaching in the curriculum beyond education. So this isn't just the new inclusions to our curriculum, but the other things that we have an educational obligation to include that will assist our children with this journey. And then fourth, the frontline workers, our teachers, the people that we will be relying on and that we will be dependent upon to make sure that our strategy gets implemented in the classroom. And then fifth, who we are as a school. This is the positive culture that we want to strive towards, but it's also the charisms that we represent. And this is a very important theme today, because we really don't want to lose sight of who we are and the owners that we represent. And then finally, our community effort. And this is that very important community partnership that is really going to influence this process. So the foundation that is a school, that is a junior school. We know a few months ago, past and current pupils across the country took to social media to share very hurtful experiences that they experienced during their time at school. We know that there was a lot of motion, we know that there was a lot of anger, and we also know that a lot of the spotlight was put on high schools. And in chatting to a few other junior school headmasters, I think they were quite relieved. They were quite relieved that a lot of their attention was with high schools, and some even went as far to say that it really is a high school issue. I completely disagree with that. This is a shared responsibility. And we know that the pupils that went through schools, and when they finished on the other side, and whether they went to De La Salle Holy Cross College or other schools, they had to have, as part of their journey, traveled through a junior or a prep school. And so this can in no other way but be looked at as a shared responsibility. So we need to take a very close look at the formative years, because this is about equipping children. And we need to accept that perhaps we are not equipping them enough when it comes to matters of diversity and inclusivity. The feelings of hurt that were experienced were as a result of a long-term educational process that has gone wrong somewhere along the way, be it through one experience or perhaps at multiple junctures. This has rightfully prompted some introspection, and it has raised many questions, good questions. And we know that if we ask better questions, we will get better answers. So as a start, we need to interrogate our normative culture. We need to ask ourselves, what do we consider normal at our school? We need to relook at our traditions, our policies, our practices, and ask ourselves, are these still relevant? Or perhaps have they become outdated? We know that children have changed, we know that society has changed, and the community has become more increasingly diverse. So as a school, have we managed to change with these changes? So that's where we are now. We're at a point of an analysis and questioning. We are in a privileged position within this foundation phase where we can assist in the process of molding and guiding children. This is an incredible responsibility. We often hear early on in school that children don't see color. And many people will agree with that, and many people will disagree. But for the point of this discussion, if we assume that this is true, then when does it change? When do children start noticing the differences in themselves compared to others? When does it take a turn, and what prompts these changes? And more importantly, what can we do to assist them as they experience these changes? We also need to ask ourselves, when are children likely to get exposed to the world of racism for the first time? And when does this sad side of humanity begin to reveal itself to our children? And as teachers and as parents, do we speed up this process by the things that we do and the things that we say? Or do we play our part by slowing it down? By asking the right questions, this will lead to a shift in culture, not a shift in ethos. And I don't want the two to get confused. But we certainly do want to assist our children as they move from merely tolerating others to sincerely accepting them. If the foundation is strong, we will be equipping our children to be intrinsically motivated to contribute towards this process. However, if the foundation is not strong, weaknesses will be exposed later on in their lives. And any systems, any policies, or any hopes of a genuine, inclusive, and diverse school will collapse. And we can expect the same hurt, anger, and anxiety from our children later on. So this certainly isn't a quick renovation or a brief makeover. It is a new construction. And this leads me to the concept of us having to deconstruct before we can reconstruct. We need to deconstruct what hasn't worked, and we have to construct what will work. And I think at this point, we are very much in the deconstruction phase. There is a lot of analysis and a questioning that has taken place. And I know that we've implemented many new initiatives, and I'll share some of those initiatives with you later on. But there still is a lot of work to be done. And as we look at each initiative and every action and decision that we take, our decisions need to reduce aggression, and they need to create an atmosphere that doesn't require an aggressor. If we're able to do that, I believe that will lead to a shift in culture. We know children, especially in a junior school, are like sponges and soaking up every verbal and non-verbal interaction. This can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. So we need to make sure that this turns out to be a positive advantage for us as parents and as teachers. So if we look at diversity and inclusivity through the eyes of children, we know that children mirror what they say, what they feel, and what they believe on examples of those around them. They base, on many occasions, their behavior on the actions that they see, and also they use what they say based on the language and terminology that they are exposed to. And that can sadly be at a maturity level that is very high for them, and not a full understanding is grasped. And I'm not only talking about bad language that parents use or teachers might use, it's language and terminology which is used to negatively describe people, and that is the most damaging. We see examples of this at school every day when children in the corridors speak about a sports team, or they might criticize a celebrity or speak badly about a politician or a political party. And in some instances, they might even be speaking badly about a particular race. We know that the thoughts of adults are echoed in the corridors of schools through the mouths of children. Children hear these things at braais. They hear them when they listen to a parent or a grown-up on the phone. And sometimes there might be a conflict with what they're hearing in the outside world as opposed to what they're hearing at school. And this can create anxiety. And we know that children want to please, so this can put them in a very difficult situation. But we certainly want our children intrinsically drawn to be a part of this process, to contribute positively because they know that it is the right thing to do. And children have a wonderful way of policing each other. And we've seen it with the wearing of masks at school. As soon as a child pulls their mask just a little bit too low, another child will be there in a flash to say, put it back up. And I need you to wear that mask because it's keeping me safe. So children are often very good at defending principles as well. But in order to defend a principle, a child needs to first and foremost feel safe. They also need to feel comfortable within themselves before they can be comfortable with others. And children may need to be helped with this. And that's okay, because we know that coaching is a part of schooling. And we heard it the other day in Renal's talk, when she was saying we can't just say to children, you must be more organized. We actually need to coach them on how to be more organized. And the same would apply on a sports field. If a parent shouts at a child, bowl straighter, the child actually needs to be coached to bowl straighter before they can achieve that. And I think the same needs to happen when we are expecting children to be more accepting and more kind. Sometimes they actually need to be coached on how to do that. The intention might be there, but they do need guidance on how to achieve it at a level that we expect from our children. And then, as we're starting to see at this foundation level, there is so much more than just identifying racism. It's equipping children on how to address racism. So in order to help children speak up, we need to help them with the language that they need. These are the tools that they will require in order to speak up effectively. And we also need to help them name their emotions, because sometimes, especially when it's an issue that deals with inclusivity or perhaps an example where they have been excluded because of some racial reason, we need to assist them as they identify that emotion and how best they can express themselves. We know that children are finding it harder to express themselves. They are living in a world where they can hide behind emojis. They often get lost in a world of gaming or TV. So there are less conversations that are taking place. So sometimes they might talk about a circumstance as opposed to their feeling. And then they will use words that they've heard around them, but that perhaps they don't really understand. So they might use words that describe themselves as being very stressed or under a lot of pressure, or perhaps they'll use the concept of feeling burnt out, where in fact they're actually feeling sad or they're feeling hurt. And those are the words that we actually want to train them to use. Another word that children use and perhaps overuse is that of something is unfair. And we need to try and help them in understanding that, is fairness really everyone getting the same thing? Or is it everyone getting what they individually need? So if they have the words, the better speaking up process will be. And the better the speaking up process, the more we can assist them with the situation. And we also know that when children run out of words or they don't have the words at the tip of their tongue, they might actually start expressing themselves in other ways. And this might be anything from fighting to feigning an illness, to gossiping, to general bad behavior, or even worse, completely withdrawing and remaining quiet. And that allows emotions to fester, which causes significant anxiety. So the last thing we want is children to withdraw or be quiet because they feel that they can't speak up or because they feel that they don't have the words to be able to express themselves. It's often discussed at junior school level that perhaps children actually have emotional superpowers because we know that when things are good with them, it's very visible. They show it, they say it, and it's the most wonderful thing. But we also can see when things aren't going well for children that they often wear their hearts on the sleeve. So that is even more reason why things shouldn't slip past us. And another thing is that children, I believe, have a wonderful ability to sense a crisis just before it happens. So listening to children and not fobbing them off, no matter how busy we are, is very, very important because these are the alarm bells, these are the cues that we must make sure that we are attentive enough to pick up on and make sure that we validate our children by listening to them. And then we also need to make sure that our systems of monitoring children in place are relevant and that they're going to achieve the objective that we need, because that will also make dealing with inclusivity and racism more productive and more concise. At the foundation level, we need to be aware of the age group that we're dealing with. And we know, especially at the junior school, that most of our children will fall in the age gap of 4 to 13-year-olds. So even more reason why it's so important that we provide the tools first. So by the time that our children get to a senior primary level or a high school level or even further on at a university level, when they find their voice and they discover the voices of others, they are better equipped. And that is most definitely our educational obligation. So from a practical point of view, how do children speak up? We've spoken about the age range, but it is very important that they feel safe enough to speak up. And we must make sure that we remain open to a variety of platforms that suit their needs and not that suit our needs. Very strict systems and protocols can be limiting. And the last thing we want is for children not to speak up because the system that we have in place for children to speak up is not user-friendly at all. So I know that we need to offer our children very different platforms so that they can find a platform that suits them. And this could be anything from talking to a teacher. We know that at a junior school age, many of our children have a very close relationship with their teacher. So that might be the person that they feel most comfortable speaking to. Sometimes children like to speak to a friend and a friend will speak up on that person's behalf. That's completely acceptable. We also really don't mind if children use their parents as a voice for them. And this ties into what I was saying earlier on, is that sometimes they might not have the words available to them. So using an adult that they trust, whether it's a parent or a teacher, could be a very handy aid in that situation. We also have our anti-racism committee, and we know from next year, we're definitely going to be making those guardians on that committee more readily available for our children. But the bottom line is we just want to provide as many options as possible for our children so that when they need to speak up, they can do so in a very safe and comfortable way for them. So all of this will assist with children's emotional wellness, especially when it comes in dealing with the anxiety that is attached to inclusion and racial acceptance. And we know that in discussing inclusivity and discussing racism, there is an underlying anxiety that many of our children experience. And in the eyes of a child who is made to feel abnormal, anxiety is a feeling that something might happen, and sadness is what they feel when it does. And we want to make sure that we prevent both. And sometimes with children, they don't know that they're not okay until one more thing happens, and that pushes them over the edge. So we need to make sure that the support that we offer counterbalances any heightened level of stress. And I know I've mentioned many different things that need to be done. So it does ask the question, how do we go about doing this? And how do we go about achieving this? And this is where we now have to integrate it into our curriculum. Up to now, many schools have combined inclusivity and diversity to life orientation. And they say it's a life orientation issue and the life orientation department must deal with it. It certainly can't be handled this way. And I think the past has revealed that. It can't be contained to one subject, and it can't only be discussed or acted on at certain times of the year or limited to specific campaigns. There is so much more to it. Yes, life orientation is the umbrella subject and it plays an important part. And we frame our life orientation in a certain structure that I'd like to share with you. And the first is self-respect and self-worth. So that is getting the children to look internally, and that ties in with the point that if they can feel comfortable with themselves, then hopefully they can feel comfortable, more comfortable with those around them. Then respect for other people, and this encompasses family, friends, and everybody who might be similar to them or might be different. Then relationships, and this is a very broad topic, and these are topics, by the way, that we cover right from grade RR all the way to grade 6. So relationships includes inclusivity, the subject of isolation, bullying, social skills, social media, which covers the other concepts as well. And then something that's very important, which is assertive behavior versus aggressive behavior. And then the final theme that they cover, or the final part of the framework, is diversity. And that is looking at cultures, different heritages, different religions, different races, human rights and equality for all, but most importantly, the aim is to not point out the differences, but to celebrate the differences. And as I said, some schools are guilty of delegating all of this to life orientation, but we have adopted an integrated approach, and it's an approach that we're very excited about. And we started by conducting an inclusivity, diversity, and racism curriculum audit. So each grade coordinator was responsible for providing a report on what they are currently including in their curriculum that involves inclusivity, diversity, and racism. And I was very pleased with the results that came back. There was a lot of ground covered, and there were many common denominators, of which I can share some with you now. But the topic of cultural acceptance, religious diversity, respect, the theme of me, specifically on looks and languages, heritage, and the concept of celebrating the differences, which I've mentioned earlier. Other themes that are all inculcated in our curriculums across the grades is the dangers of stereotyping, preconceived ideas about a person, and the actual concept of kindness. Do children know what is kindness? And these are all terminologies that we take for granted that they know. I was also pleased with the amount of true life South African stories that have been ingrained across the curriculum, and not only in subjects like history and in English, but the way that our language teachers are using them. It's been used in art. So it really was a wonderful thing to see. And the South African examples also were shown in our set workbooks and South African songs and South African poems. So there is a lot of emphasis on inclusivity and diversity within a South African context, And we have really made a concerted effort to get away from the Eurocentric approach that we all know has now become a little bit outdated. Having said all that, we mustn't underestimate the power of our RE program. We know that Catholicism represents the fact that everyone is welcome. And so many of the ideas that we share in our curriculum is underpinned by those gospel values. So the RE lessons is, again, another wonderful opportunity for our children, for our teachers to share with our children the different examples of inclusivity and diversity. And this can be anything from talking about saints of color to different parables. So many of those stories tie back to the topic that we're discussing today. It's just important that we make sure that we bring those stories to light for our children. And then, of course, there's the very practical things that we need to do. And we have started with some very simple, low-hanging fruit ideas. But as I said earlier, there is a lot of work to be done. There's lots of ideas that we've discussed. It's now just a part of frameworking it and making sure that they're implemented within a very short space of time. So something that has happened, a very simple example, is the purchasing of these. These are the Color Me crayons, which our grade RR and grade Rs are now using. So we know a very common task that those little children down there have to do is draw a self-image or draw a picture of their family. And we can't underestimate how stressful that might be for some children. And I know that this might be a debatable topic as well, where some parents or some teachers might say, but children don't see color. We shouldn't be describing people as color. However, our teachers and schools across the country have seen it. That small act of having to look for the right color of how to draw yourself can build up very difficult questions and can build up a lot of anxiety. And these are all the things that we want to assist our children with. A few more practical things. We really do use public holidays to the best of our advantage. But when we talk about public holidays, I don't want them to be seen as a once-off day. There really is a big build-up to that particular day. And we saw it with our Heritage Day celebrations. The learning didn't only happen on the day. It happened before, and of course it happened in the debrief afterwards. And it wasn't contrived. It was really children learning from each other and teachers making use of a wonderful learning opportunity to discuss very sensitive issues, but within a fun and a lifelong learning way. Another example is Youth Day celebrations. And I know there is a grade that actually make posters fighting for human rights, and they live the experience of protesting. So it really does promote questions, and it ties into the 21st century learning techniques that we're using in our classroom, where the higher order questionings are put across to our children, which promotes critical thinking. And hopefully that will allow them to think freely for themselves, and they won't just share opinions that have been imposed on them by others. We also make good use of our flexible learning programs. Yes, in the past, they have been very focused on subjects such as science, history, or geography, and there's a wonderful opportunity for us to use our flexible learning program days on subjects that perhaps cover more of the humanities side of life. And we also want children to share their experiences. And this is something else that we use daily and teachers use daily. And it was very evident in the reports that I received. And it's experiences not only that they contribute to, but experiences that they can take from. And we really want them, by doing that, to feel safe within their own cultures and within the cultures that they represent. We know that we have our weekly assemblies, and the topics that we cover are very much linked to inclusivity, diversity. This isn't the only thing we talk about, but a lot of it will tie into that. The concept of respect is very evident in a lot of the themes that we cover in assemblies. And then something else, and this is, I think, something I'm guilty of, is I speak often with prospective parents about the connect time that we have placed in school at the start of the day. But perhaps it's something that I failed to mention to our current parents. So in the past, our children used to line up at the start of the day, and as a school, we'd say a prayer, and then the children would lead off to their classes. We found that children actually don't have a lot of time to just chat with their teachers anymore. There's a lot of academic work that needs to be covered, but we've seen that there's been an increasing need for children to offload, to talk, to perhaps share a prayer intention. So instead of lining up as a school, the children go off to their classes, they will open with a prayer, and then there might be a devotion. But that is also a wonderful opportunity for our children to speak up about something that might be on their heart, and also importantly for us as a school to pick up on if there is a child that we need to assist, especially if it comes to an issue of inclusivity. And just, it really is a time for us where we can have a look at those warning signs and turn it into a helpful situation. But something else that is very important to this process is the power of books. And we have two wonderful librarians, in Mrs. Adams and Mrs. Heaney, and they really do spend a lot of time trying to source current books that can elicit wonderful conversations, that can promote questions. And these are the books that we are trying to circulate amongst our children. And that does tie in with the type of language and names that we use in perhaps worksheets or within examples of our class. But I certainly do believe that with more books that cover themes and ideas that are related to inclusivity and diversity, the more we can start discussing these things and the more we can start addressing the problems. But something else that we also need to be very aware of, and that is the importance of the role of soft skills. So often school systems force children to ditch the soft skills, or at the very least don't provide enough opportunities for children to exercise them. And there is the list of the soft skills that I'm sure most of us have heard about. And we won't get anywhere if soft skills aren't promoted and opportunities are not provided for children to develop these skills. Education and child development needs to include a combination of learning both hard and soft skills. Let's not forget that although some time has passed, we are still teaching in the wake of apartheid, and soft skills are desperately needed in South African schools and in our country as a whole. So the key is consistency. We need to make sure that everything that we're trying to achieve, all the themes that we are trying to cover, are not just boxed within one or two subjects, that it is ongoing, and that this effort is something that is continuous, and that we are making sure that it is incredibly evident within our planning that it gets submitted. We also need to go beyond what is obvious. So a curriculum is obvious, a textbook is obvious, life orientation is obvious. But there are other factors that we need to consider that is beyond the very obvious education that schools offer. And we need to continuously discuss how we can redo education, not just for the sake of it, but to make sure that we remain relevant, not only from an academic point of view, but from a life skills point of view. We know that an outdated curriculum, or perhaps a very colonial curriculum, or a curriculum that is based on the Industrial Revolution, can really vandalize a child's education. Deep learning takes place when children are engaged, but that engagement needs to be authentic. And this is where we are dependent on staff to make sure that it is authentic. So the frontline workers, our teachers, and these are definitely our greatest assets. There is a lot that is riding on their shoulders. And once again, I'd just like to reiterate how proud I've been with the concerted effort that has been made of late to bring in more life skill themes in an integrated approach across subject. And in a very short space of time, the evidence is there of what the teachers are already achieving. But we still need to remain aware of how we teach. And if there are any subconscious racial biases that may exist, we need to be very careful of the language that we use, of the opinions that we share, not only in the classroom, but out in the public domain. So teachers across the world need assistance with this. Staff training needs to be ongoing. And yes, we've already started with a staff development workshop on inclusivity and diversity. But there are many more workshops that we need to provide for our teachers to make sure that they have a full understanding of what it is that needs to be done. But we also need to hear from our staff how they're feeling, as much as we need to hear from our students, because how a teacher feels will affect the way that they teach. So we have created many forums of giving opportunities for our teachers to talk. We've conducted a survey and the results were very fascinating. And it highlighted the fact that so many teachers are coming from off a different base, and so many teachers are interpreting transformation as a process in very different ways. So that is good data for us to have, because it shows where we need to assist teachers in that regard. We also are starting to make more use of our anti-racism committee, which is chaired by our Deputy Head of Academics, Mandy Gopal. And the aim of this committee is to listen to people, and it's to share concerns, it's to share ideas. And their role is also not to be a watchdog to catch people out, but is also to identify what we are doing is correct and to implement the direct strategy related to the ongoing inclusivity awareness that we need to have in our school. So yes, we will drive it from the top, but alongside our teachers, we will be working alongside each other. We will be learning as we go, and we will be listening to each other as we share and implement new ideas. So our teachers are such a valuable instrument in this process, but we really do, like our children, need to equip them first before we can expect them to take on this job of teaching racial awareness to our children. And the reality is, regardless of race, this comes more naturally to some teachers than others. So the mentorship and the staffing development that needs to take place is imperative. We know that our staff needs to be more representative of our country as a whole, and we are actively working towards this. And already in the recent processes that have taken place, not only at the junior school but at the high school, there has been success in that regard, because we've learned, we know that good teachers of color are out there. But it's also made us relook at our internal structures. It's made us ask questions about our mentorship programs. How are we developing teachers of color within our school community? And not only that we can make use of them when they qualify or when they are ready to teach, but perhaps we can equip teachers of color to be used across schools in the country. So it is a much bigger process than just hiring teachers of color. There's so much more opportunity for us than that, because we also need to make sure that our staff can't just be visibly suitable. They need to be active agents of change. So the fifth theme is who we are as a school. So this is our moral compass. This is what our ethos is born out of, our Lasallian Holy Cross core principles. And as you can see, every single one of those 5 ties into inclusivity and ties into diversity. Because the reality is, our 2 charisms, the De La Salle brothers and the Holy Cross systems, are, well, they represent anti-racism, they represent inclusivity, and they represent diversity. So when we are accountable to those 2 charisms that own the school. So yes, we know we owe it to our parents, we owe it to our children, but we mustn't forget who we are, because first and foremost, we owe it to the Lasallian Association and the Holy Cross charism. And we are custodians of the ethos. When I say we, it's a collective. It's us as a staff, it's us as a parent, to make sure that these core principles are implemented as a school, because it is these 2 charisms that we are accountable to, like I said, because this is where our ethos was born from. And I know I've said this before, but I will say it again. Our Lasallian and our Holy Cross ethos has to be a verb, and it cannot be a noun. And what I mean by that is that our ethos needs to be lived and seen in our actions, and not just be something that we speak about. But having said that, because we have these 2 very wonderful charisms that we belong to, we can't become complacent, and we can't just assume that we are a non-racial or desegregated environment just because we belong to it. Our core principles are a wonderful blueprint for us to work from in addressing inclusion and diversity. Something else that we do need to continue reevaluate, as I mentioned earlier on, is our policies, because our policies will play an important role in clarifying our ethos. So we have to get it right. And yes, we know that policies are always a working document and a work in progress. And I know that with our current policies, it has taken longer than expected. But I have personally been very encouraged by the amount of time and effort that has been invested in making sure that we get these policies right. Because I do think it is quite easy to create a policy that a school can hide behind and merely use as a tick box. And we also don't want policies where the focus is solely on defending the rules or the words of that policy. But the focus needs to be on the principles that are represented in that policy. And we sometimes see that within hair policies that schools share. There's so much time and complicated wording that gets put into discussing the length of hair, the color of hair, the style of hair. And schools by default end up policing the words and lose sight of the principles. And the hair policies represent racial principles, and it's those principles that need to be defended. It's the heart and the sincerity behind any policy that counts, not just the surface value of the words. So finally, our community effort. And this is the community partnership that is going to influence this process. As it stands, education has a racial weakness. Education is a joint collaboration between parents and school. It is quite easy for schools to become guilty of blaming parents and to say things like, all the good work that happens at school gets undone when our children arrive back at home. In the same breath, it's also quite easy for parents to blame schools, saying the same thing. All the good work that they do at home gets undone when their children arrive at school if these issues aren't made a priority. So we can note that point, but I don't think we must get consumed, and we really must avoid blaming each other. Because education in general is a successful process if the partnership between parents and school is healthy. And the same applies with transformation, diversity, and inclusion. Our approach to inclusivity may not always marry, and we know that, but we need to collectively accompany our children through that and be aware that the support of each other is really going to determine the positive outcome that we can achieve for our children. We're also going to make more use of our PAC, and the PAC, our Parents Association Committee, is going to be the conduit between the school and the parents. And I've been very pleased that transformation and diversity has become a fixed agenda on that item. We have a portfolio there now, so that the parents can monitor the work that we're doing, and we can use the parents to our advantage to assist us with what we want to achieve. I know I've mentioned it earlier, but parents and teachers are in a very powerful and influential position. And as we know, this can be a good or a bad thing, depending on how we use that influence. We have seen that society has become guilty of categorizing people. Once society has categorized people, and once we've put them in groups, we associate traits to them in a dramatically stereotypical fashion. And as a community, we need to correct that behavior and that bad habit for the sake of this process and for the sake of our children. Collectively, for every one negative thing that our children see, hear, or feel, we as parents and as a school need to counteract with two positives. These children are relying on us to be examples of positive change. As is the case with grown-ups, each child will be journeying at a different pace and at a different level of understanding, and we need to respect that. And we also need to be aware that their individual journeys will be affected by things that are sometimes in their control and sometimes out of their control. But we are here to accompany and to support them. So will everything that we are doing and that we are still going to do eliminate racism? The reality is maybe not entirely. But we are sincere, we are committed, and hopefully we can chip away at some of the wrongs of the past and create an atmosphere and a culture that promotes a reconstruction of a solid foundation, so that our parents, our staff, and most importantly, our children will be equipped to not only cope, but to flourish, to not only learn, but to contribute, to not only feel safe, but to provide safety for others, and to not just tolerate, but to sincerely accept. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you very much, Neil. That was awesome. That was fantastic. Actually, it does make me feel proud that we have intent with what we promised the community that we're going to do. This shows intent, and I'm very, very happy to be part of this community. And well done to you and your staffers. And I, I, I pray that this becomes a very successful initiative. Then I just want to notify everybody else that for questions, you may put them in the comments. We'll go through them. If you can just indulge me a little bit. Hopefully this will also dovetail nicely with Neil's presentation. As a father and as an uncle, I have a privilege of guiding my nieces and nephews as they grow, trying to mold them, because the current affairs are telling us that the old way of raising a man are inefficient. And in fact, it's the real cause of some of the problems that our ladies are facing. So this refers to gender-based violence. So in that process of trying to raise a very protective and yet supportive young man who will then one day meet his suitor and create a fantastic family that is just going to be amazing. But on the other side, I'm raising a niece who is very self-assured, who is not waiting for no one to do nothing for them, and which is fantastic, because now they can, as ladies, they can express themselves in their own time, in their own way, etc. So that's the future that I'm hoping to help create for my nieces and nephews, sons and daughter. But now there comes a future point where these two will meet. And that is my fear. That's where my anxiety lies, where this, if my sons and nephews are not, their minds and hearts are not pliable enough to meet with this assertive, strong woman who's supposed to be their suitor, that's gonna be an explosion, a social disaster in a way. And and with that, I would like to take it back to the racial part too, to say, as a person of color, here I am raising children of color who are going to be assertive, who are going to go out there and claim what's theirs. If we don't do the same, if we don't do the same for the white children, to prepare them for the future that's coming, because now we are rewriting everything. Nobody knows where we are going. So I would like to encourage ourselves as the privileged adults who are here to enforce, or rather to direct the future. For it to be successful, we need to see the future as it is going to be and prepare our young ones for that future, so that they can get together and say, look back and say, this is the legacy that our elders have left behind for us. It's up to us now to build and move forward. So let's not be one-sided in this solution, always expecting that it will be just from one side of the spectrum that's going to have to do something. All of us have to do equally in our own way, work as hard for that future, because none of us want our young ones to end up with a future that says, Dad, what did you do? Why did you not prepare me for this? So as long as we can see with intent and have that vision and hope, I think we will be successful. And also we have to face the fears. We can't brush over this. We have to face these cruel fears that are plaguing us as parents or plaguing the community currently as large. Face them. Let's see what solutions we can provide now. I'm hoping that made sense for everybody, so I'm going to be quiet and then see if there are any questions that we can go through. But thank you very much, Neil. That was fantastic, and our little ones are in good hands here. Thank you very much. Are there any questions there, polite, that we need to go through? What do you see?
There aren't any questions. There are a lot of
Oh,
compliments. I'll just read
awesome.
out what has been put there. Coletta says, this
Excellent.
talk is very powerful. Only wish the whole community could hear this on it and take it seriously. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
We will share the recording. It will be put on YouTube, and we'll also upload the presentation as a PDF on the School app, and we'll encourage people to watch. I think that for the parents that are here and the staff that are here, it's also important that you encourage your peers and your friends to say, this was very useful, this applies to everybody, please go and watch, and we can engage more constructively as a community and move in one voice. The second comment says, I totally agree, would be wonderful if more parents would engage in this important process. We will get there. I think one of the things that we have realized when we've been working on this is that if we focus on the number of people absent, we won't move forward. So rather, we will engage with whoever is present, and the presence of those people would then influence the greater community. And your words going out there, the actions that we're taking, will actually motivate people to join us the next time. And even if they don't join us, as long as we get the information to their hearts and minds, will change, and this will help our efforts of transforming the community. We have another comment that says, that was such an incredible presentation. I agree, Coletta. Marlies says, I agree, very happy to hear what the school is doing to include diversity topics in all areas of our children's education. And Judy says, thank you so much, Neil. This was not only relevant and bound in our school's ethos, but offered practical steps. A question, how do we get more parents involved? Do you want to answer that, Lucius? That's the question for the day.
Yes, I'll start first with the current understanding, in that most of these awkward topics and themes in our lives have to find you where you are. If we have to drag you, then it's counterproductive. So in a way, we as the ones who are currently participating, unfortunately end up becoming ambassadors for these topics that we are discussing. And with us being part of the bigger discourse as we are discussing it in our spaces, we're hoping that more people will join in, because one thing you cannot do is to force somebody to change. They have to be ready in their own way to say, you know what, step by step, I need to come closer. So I have great respect for everybody gathered here, and also even the ones that haven't come. And all I'm doing is with prayer, and also with making sure that the topics that we are discussing are building, so that at one point when they get to hear about them, they can see that I am missing out on something. But we cannot look down on them. These topics are hard and awkward, and they need a lot out of you, and you have to yourself tell yourself that, you know what, I want to be part of this and I want to engage. But if you don't want to, we can't force you, because it's unfair on everybody else who's here. Look, I'm hoping that will answer that question.
Thanks.
Okay.
I have a question for Patrick. He shared a file, but I'm unable to access it. It says it requires permission. So if you don't mind telling us what that is about.
Patrick.
I'm technologically challenged on Google Meet, Polite. I was actually just trying to send a comment, but I've put the comment now.
Oh, okay. I see it now. Okay, so we have a comment. It's all right, from Kathy, that says, it would perhaps be good to email the parents the presentation so that it lands in everybody's inbox. Such a great, practical, positive presentation. Thank you. Perhaps, Neil, you'd like to answer that, because the balance between informing people and spamming people as well. I'm not too sure how we can respond to this.
Yeah, absolutely. So if people would like to have access to this, absolutely, we need to let them know that they can have access to it. Whether we take it directly to them, I think that might need a further discussion, and I think that relates to a little bit with what Lucius was referring to. But just going back a step to how can we get more parents involved, discuss this at a PAC level, and I think as much as the school has intent to get this right, I think the majority, unless I've been incredibly naive, I think the majority of our parents also have intent to work with us to get this right as well. So we are going to be using our PAC more actively to help us bridge this gap between those that are involved and listening and those who are perhaps not. But we need to do it in such a way that they are accepting and willing participants in the process.
Patrick's comment says, thanks, Neil. You're absolutely right. We can't ignore the formative years. I like the fact that you will equip the children to be able to deal with their differences, especially on the playground. Great talk. And then we have one last comment from Coletta, who says, I hear you, Lucius, but in my view, a topic like this should be compulsory. This has to do with our ethos. And that's our final comment. Do you want to respond to that, Lucius, please?
Not so much in responding, but I would like to, if possible, polite you and her to exchange a few ideas, because I don't want to sound like I'm dismissive of ideas, but I also don't want to compel people. So Coletta, if you don't mind, if you can contact Polite on or Polite can contact you and say if you've got ideas to share, because I'm very happy to involve more people, but like I said, I don't want to compel people, but also I don't want this to sound like it's Lucius's idea. So there's a helping hand available. Please let's move the discussion forward. If that's okay with you, Coletta, then I think that would be my response in that regard, please.
Okay.
Thank
I think
you.
that's perfect. And as mentioned earlier, we will upload the presentation and the link on the Mindshift icon on the school app. So it will be available to everybody. Not too sure if there are any other comments. I'll hand it back to you, Lucius, to close. Oh, there's one more, sorry.
Okay,
Sorry.
one more.
Yeah.
No problem.
Thank you, Lucius, for raising the issue of gender. I like to believe that we first teach our children to be humans, and then on that foundation, we work with the differences of gender, race, culture, etc. Our children need to learn to dialogue, not debate their differences.
Agreed. I like that. Thank you, Rato. Thank you very much.
Lucius, if I could just jump in very quickly, if that is okay with you.
Yes, sir.
Firstly, just good afternoon to everybody and those who have joined us today. I'm going to be extremely presumptuous and on behalf of all of those gathered here for this presentation, just to congratulate Neil and his team on the work that has happened so far this year and the strides that have been made in the junior school. And Neil, your support in terms of understanding that it's a collective effort is huge, and I appreciate that, and I acknowledge your input and guidance on that too. I think the one thing that stands out for me is, again, the importance of our community when it comes to raising our children. And again, being involved in a community of family, friends, relations, and neighbors is so important in the growth and development of the children entrusted to our care. And we all know that a community gives a child support, a sense of belonging, a strong sense of self, and a sense of connection. And when our children feel emotionally and physically safe and valued, they obviously develop the social abilities and have a sense of sharing and caring for each other, which is essentially what we're trying to achieve here as well. Neil, congratulations again to you and your team, Mandy, and everybody else. It's so exciting to watch the developments happening, if I can say, across from road number 3. But just congratulations to you, to all of you and your team and your incredible teachers as well. It is an absolute privilege to get to witness the work that you guys are doing on a daily basis. Godspeed, keep it up, and we look forward to walking this path, not only with you, but also with our community, our children, and our parents also. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. There's another note there. Can you read it, Polite?
Patrick saying, Polite and Lucius, please excuse me. I need to go into an MDC meeting. Well done.
Oh, okay, no, that's good. Thank you very much. I think if there's nothing else, it is just gratitudes all around and compliments. Thank you very much. And I do believe this initiative of Transformation Thursdays is really catching fire. I think that's a perfect phrase. It's catching fire, and thank you very much, Polite, for all your hard work. Keep at it. And I think even the way we're advertising it is good. We can get better, I'm sure, but that's why I wanted Colette and you to start talking more if possible. We need bigger ideas on how to go bigger. But with where we are now, I am over the moon. This is the best turnout I could ever thought about, because we've never been this big in most of these topics. So we are really growing as a concerned community that meets regularly on these themes. So thank you very much for that. And with that, I would say bye-bye, everybody. We'll see you again on our next installment. Thank you very much. God bless. Bye-bye.